Well, good morning. Granny Gear here for Old Guy on a Bike. Well, it's finally happened. SRAM let the 13-speed cat out of the bag. And I've been thinking about that and wondering to myself, if I had one more cog in my one-bike cassette, do I care? And, frankly, what would I do with it? On this Tech Tuesday, rambling on about 13-speed one-bike cassettes. Now I know someone else did 13-speed cassettes before SRAM did, but really, does that matter? I mean, who actually uses that stuff? But when SRAM or Shimano, when they do something like that, well, it matters, because they have the horsepower to make that a thing. It'll be spec'd on bikes. I've got a friend that's already got the new SRAM Red Explorer 13-speed on his brand new gravel bike. He is an early adopter. You know what? I'm kind of a late adopter. I like to see how things shake out before I jump in, and right now, the 13-speed stuff is only SRAM Red Explorer, and that, as you probably know, is a lot of coin. And I don't like spending that much on parts, but you know, at some point here, 13-speed will be coming to force. The force level of Explorer and, probably rival and on and on. Because they're not going to stop with just having one application of 13-speed, I don't think. But it has me thinking about, with my existing setup, running the mullet on my gravel bike, and even maybe for a future all-road bike, if I had a 13-speed cassette, in other words, one more cog in the stack that I've got now with my 1052 Garberuk mullet setup. If I had one more cog, what would I do with it? Because I don't really need a lower gear. In other words, I don't want a 56 tooth cassette, top cog, And I don't even know if the manufacturers ever try and do that. I mean, wow, at some point, it would be a pretty crazy derailleur setup for something like that. So it makes sense, I suppose, to fill in the gaps. Now, I'm not particularly interested in having a 9-tooth cog on the bottom of my cassette. If you guys have spent time in a 10-tooth cog, like it's on this cassette and others, SRAM and Shimano, it's a kind of rumbly, tumbly kind of experience. You can feel the chain working really hard to spin around that little tiny cog at RPMs. Now, I don't think a 9-tooth, well, that would just have to be worse, wouldn't it? And I don't think I really want that, or need that, frankly. So let's stop a minute, look at my cassette, and think about, let's imagine, what would I do with that one more cog? Well, if I don't need it on top, in other words, this 52, that's plenty big enough. And I don't want it on the bottom because any less than 10 teeth is going to feel like I'm pedaling a gravel mixer, so to speak. No pun intended. Then where am I going to put it? Well, it's going to be in the middle somewhere. And, I've been running now this 1052, this mullet setup for quite a while now. And with the Garberuk, with the better spacing of the second cog down compared to the SRAM, I did a video on that. And I'll link that at the end if you guys want to understand why I went to Garberuk over SRAM. There's a good reason for that. It's worked out really well for me. I don't need it up here because this gap isn't as bad as you'd expect it might be. Well, I'm going to put it somewhere else. You know what? I'd like to have an 11. I'd like to have an 11-tooth cog in this because when I use this on the road, the 38, I'm running a 38-tooth front chainring now, which has worked out really well. The 3810 is good for about 29 to 30 miles an hour. Now, 30 miles an hour, I'm spun out pretty good, but it works. And then 21, 22, 23, 24 in the 12-tooth cog, which is the next one up from the 10, that's fine. But in the middle there, sometimes I feel like I fall into the gap. Remember that old commercial? Well, if I had an 11 on this, I think that would be really, really nice. Not necessary, but nice. And so if I'm going to go 13 speed in this, well, I'm going to have an 11 tooth cog. If anybody was asking, hey, Granny Gear, what kind of cassette would you like in 13 teeth? For gravel, at least, it would be that. Now, the Explorer 13 speed cassette falls a little short for me, honestly. You know what they did is they took the 1044 cassette from Explorer and they made it a 1046, but they didn't change the second cog down. So now you got a big gap up to the 46, which I don't think I like that much. And they added a 12 tooth cog because it used to go 10, 11, probably 10, 11, 14, something like that. I don't have it memorized. And that's kind of cool. And I think for a fast gravel setup or an all-road setup, that's really pretty good, although that big jump to the 46, I'm not a fan. Because I'm thinking eventually, for an all-road setup, I might try 1x. Because I've been finding out some interesting things as I've been changing gearing on my Time 80HX. I found out that I could live very nicely with a 46 tooth big chainring. Now, if I can do that on 2x, maybe I could do that on 1x. But the problem is, there isn't really a 12 speed cassette out there that would make me super happy if I was going to do that. Because a 4644, if I did the SRAM Explorer, the 12 speed, well, that's not a very low gear. You know, it's okay. It ain't great. And for a bike that I was going to spend hours on, probably big climbs, maybe even semi off-roadish stuff occasionally, that is not a low enough gear for this guy. So I would need bigger than the 1044 Explorer cassette. The 1046 would be close. That would give me 1-to-1. That's okay. That's getting better. But I would like to have a little bit more. Well, I don't want to do a mountain bike cassette necessarily. I could do a 1050 or a 1052. But that's probably more than I need. So how about this? Did you know the Garbarook, they make a 1048 cassette in 12 speed? It's Eagle. That's actually pretty cool. Now, imagine that with a closer gap up at the top. That's pretty cool. 46, 48, I could live with that unless it was going to be a big day. And then with 1x, guess what? You just change your front chainring. You want a lower gear? So 46 to 44 to 42, whatever you need, and then you can just change it back. Maybe you need another chain or something. How do you do that with 2x? Well, you really don't, do you? Well, 1x, you can. So here's this Garbarook cassette, 1048. Now, what if it was all of a sudden 13 speed and he slots an 11 in there? Because if I was going to use this for the road, that missing 11 tooth that I notice on the gravel bike, it would bug me even more, I think, on the road than it does on the gravel bike. So if I could have a 13 speed Garbarook 1048 or something like that and had the 11 in there, making it a 13, that would greatly interest me. Now it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out, this 13 speed movement. Because you know what SRAM did when they introduced the transmission for mountain bikes? If I have this right, if not, please correct me. They took the cassette and they moved it outboard. Good morning, good morning. Have a great ride. They moved it outboard, I think 2.5 millimeters, so about 1 cog spacing. Because the transmission mount, UDH mount and all that, it allowed for that kind of room and precision. Now that's pretty cool because if you move your cassette out, you get a better chain line, don't you? And the chain line in the top cog of a 1x, especially in that big a cassette with a bigger road type chainring, it gets pretty steep, pretty acute, you know? Now, I don't know what SRAM did with the red. It's not a programmed cassette. It's not a narrow wide like transmission. I'm going to assume that the way they mounted their 13 speed derailleur, they don't call it transmission. I think they call it full mount, or I can't remember what it is. I'll put it up on screen. It's a variant of that without the narrow wide cassette. So it's basically standard flat top chain kind of road. I assume what they did was outboarded the cassette and then put the extra width of the 13th cog over the top of the cassette. Probably ended up back where it was before it got moved outboard, if you follow me. I'm assuming. I don't know. If you know, let me know. Which makes me wonder how that's going to work for the aftermarket folks. Because if SRAM has a patent, I assume they do, on a narrow wide cassette tooth profile, I don't know how that'll ever work for aftermarket transmission type cassettes. But since the road stuff is not narrow wide, well, that would be probably easier to make like the Scarborough for it. The thing is, here's the conundrum. If I want a low gear, like a 48 tooth cassette or deeper on one by, I got to go Eagle. Because Explorer, even though it has the normal tooth profile and it'll be 13 speed, I could make a bigger cassette. There's no derailleur to shift it. Can't use an Eagle derailleur. And you can't use an Explorer derailleur, because right now at least 46 is most it'll do. Maybe it'll do more outside the box, I don't know. So we may end up in a situation where these limitations are designed in. And so unless they ever do like a 13 speed Eagle, which may never happen, I don't know what we'll end up doing. Maybe we'll be able to take a T-type transmission derailleur and use it on a regular cassette without the programmed narrow wide cogs. Would that work? It might. I don't know. Anyway, interesting thoughts, huh? And it's part of the conundrum of, as things get more integrated, so to speak, and these systems come along, sometimes you might lose options. And you know what? I kind of like options. And you know what? Right now, as it is, 12 speed, well, it gives me a lot of options, doesn't it? I've got Explorer, which works pretty good if you can live with the gearing. I've got my Eagle mullet. That works really well. I got all kinds of cassette options and chainring options and whatnot. And if I can live without an 11 tooth cog, which I can, meh. Anyway, just some thinking out loud on the 13 speed movement, how that's going to kind of play out. I don't know. But you know it's going to keep going, because once it happens, unless it's a disaster, and I doubt it will be, it's going to just keep going and growing. Interesting to see Shimano's response to this, if they do a high-end GRX 13 speed. I don't know. They move at a very glacial pace, Shimano, in response to things. SRAM is really the innovator. Maybe the Chinese. Maybe we'll see something come out of that market that'll be that 13 speed as well, and maybe that'll be the options if they ever get that stuff to be actually reliable with customer service. That could be a real player. All right, anyway, that's it for now, you guys. I'm going to go take my gravel bike down a single track, and then I think I'm gonna go get coffee. You guys have a great weekend or weekend, and as always, you go ride your bikes and stick around for the single track section, huh? Gonna be fun.
Bueno, sí. Camina. Rico, rico, rico. Y como dice mi coro que sigue ahí. Escucha mi salsa buena, abre la ventana. Escucha. Ahora estamos gozando hasta la mañana. Escucha mi salsa buena.
Thank goodness for 45 millimeter tires. Woo, that was rocky. Fun though.
Los tambores están arrollando.
Oh yeah. Ah, good fun. Okay, time for coffee.